2 years ago, an engineer and his wife vanished without a trace after investigating a classified government contract in North Carolina. Their case went cold. No leads, no suspects, no hope, until now. In 2018, their dog returned. Bloody, limping, and with something hidden in his collar that would unravel a cover-up bigger than anyone imagined. This is not just a mystery. It's a story of loyalty beyond death, a mother's unbreakable instinct, and a dog who carried the truth home. Join Nestsoul as we unfold a 12-part true story that proves when love is real, it leaves a trail, even when people disappear. The late summer sun hung low over the Appalachian horizon, casting long golden streaks across the quiet outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. Lorraine Carter knelt stiffly beside her tomato vines, hands buried in red earth, her back aching beneath the weight of age and memory. At 73, her body no longer moved with the grace it once had, but she refused to let that patch of garden turn to weeds. It was all she had left to manage in a world that had taken more than it ever returned. She reached for another stubborn root, gritting her teeth, when the kitchen timer buzzed faintly through the open window, reminding her of the cornbread in the oven. "Damn it," she muttered, pushing off the ground with both hands and bracing her hip against the porch railing. But as she reached for the screen door, a movement at the far edge of the porch made her stop cold. A shadow, a shape, and then something impossible. A black dog, filthy, trembling, its fur matted with blood and grime, emerged from the corner of the porch like a ghost. Lorraine's knees buckled and her breath hitched in her throat. She gripped the doorframe to stay upright. "Shadow?" she whispered. The dog's eyes lifted slowly, dulled with exhaustion and pain. A low whine escaped its throat. One front leg was bound in a dirty strip of cloth, soaked through with something dark. The dog collapsed just inches from her feet, too weak to bark, to stand, to do anything except exist. Lorraine staggered backward, her heart thundering. "No," she whispered. "No, no, it can't be." But it was. Shadow. Her son, Jamal's Labrador, missing for 2 years. Since the day Jamal and his wife Monica vanished during a hunting trip in the mountains. Lorraine dropped to her knees, heedless of the pain that screamed through her joints, reaching out with shaking hands. Shadow gave another faint whimper, trying to lift his head. "Oh, my baby," she choked, tears blurring her vision. "What happened to you?" Her fingers brushed against the makeshift bandage. Someone had done this. Someone had tried to help. Or silence. With trembling hands, she fumbled for her phone in the gardening apron tied at her waist, dialing 911 with numb fingers. The operator answered, calm and efficient, but Lorraine's voice cracked under the weight of years and grief. "This is Lorraine Carter. I need help. My son's dog, he just came back." "My son, Jamal Carter. He's been missing for 2 years. Ma'am, are you safe? Is anyone else there?" "Just me and the dog. Please hurry. He's badly hurt." Shadow gave a weak thump of his tail against the porch boards, a flicker of recognition in those eyes. Lorraine couldn't look away. "Where's Jamal?" she whispered. "Where's my son?" Sirens echoed faintly in the distance as Lorraine collapsed onto the porch step, her gaze locked with Shadow's. Minutes later, flashing lights painted the gravel driveway in red and blue, 2 patrol cars, then a third. One officer she recognized, Deputy Rivera, who'd been on the original search team 2 years ago. He stopped cold when he saw the dog. "Jesus, is that really?" Lorraine nodded, unable to speak. "It's Shadow." A young female vet knelt beside the dog, gently examining him as he lay motionless. Severely dehydrated, infected wound on the skull. "This bandage is old, weeks at least," she murmured. "Someone did this, tried to help him. But he's been alone for a long time." Lorraine's breath caught. Then someone saw him, someone knew. Rivera placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're going to get him to the clinic. And we need to take you to the station. Detectives will want to talk." Lorraine nodded blankly, her mind already racing ahead. Who bandaged Shadow? Where had he been for 2 years? And where, God help her, was her son? As the dog was lifted onto a stretcher and loaded into the animal control van, Lorraine climbed into the back of the patrol car. Through the glass, she watched Shadow's dark eyes following her, as if begging her to keep looking. "I'm not stopping," she whispered. "You brought him back to me. Now I'll find the rest." But in the pit of her stomach, something twisted. A knowing that what Shadow had returned to reveal was something more than she was ready to uncover. The veterinary clinic in downtown Asheville smelled of antiseptic and soft cedar bedding, the kind meant to comfort animals who wouldn't stop shaking. Shadow lay motionless on the stainless steel table, breathing shallow and slow, his body a roadmap of trauma. Dr. Celia Rayner, the attending vet, moved carefully around him, her gloved hands pausing each time she found something new, something worse. Lorraine Carter stood behind the observation glass, her fingers pressed against it, knuckles white with worry. She hadn't spoken much on the drive over, too afraid that her voice would crack and all the questions she was holding back would pour out in a flood too heavy to contain. She watched as Celia peeled back the makeshift bandage around Shadow's leg, her breath caught. There, beneath layers of dried blood and grime, was not only a clean wound, but clean stitching, hand-stitched, human hands. "It's not just a bandage," Celia said when she finally emerged from the treatment room, removing her gloves. "It's field stitching. Sloppy, but intentional. Someone tried to save him. Then that means someone saw him," Lorraine whispered. "Someone touched him. Shadow wasn't alone." Celia nodded slowly. "At least not the whole time. The leg wound is older than the one on his head. That one is raw, deep. A blunt force impact, most likely." Lorraine's mouth went dry. "From what?" "Hard to say, but it wasn't natural. Not a fall. Something or someone struck him." Shadow was sedated now, finally resting under soft lights and clean linens, but the damage remained. His ribs protruding beneath fur that no longer shone, one ear torn, multiple healed-over scars that no one had ever seen on him before. He'd been through something cruel and long. Celia placed a hand gently on Lorraine's arm. "I think this dog survived out there longer than most humans could, and he didn't just survive. He came home." Lorraine nodded slowly, her voice breaking. "He came home. Alone." The door behind them opened, and a detective entered. A woman Lorraine had never met before, in a tailored navy suit and flat shoes, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Carter?" Lorraine turned. "Detective Shaw. I'm with the state task force now coordinating with the local sheriff's office. I'm very sorry about everything you've gone through. We're reopening the case based on this development. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if that's all right." Lorraine sat stiffly in the small office they were led to. The walls were covered in missing pet flyers, fundraisers for injured dogs, and bright thank you cards scribbled in child handwriting. None of them matched the weight in Lorraine's chest. "Can you tell me what you remember about the last time you saw your son and daughter-in-law?" Shaw asked gently. Lorraine closed her eyes. "It was 2 years ago, September. They were headed up to the Smokies for their anniversary. Jamal loved those woods, knew them better than anyone. Monica, too. She was a vet. This kind of place," she gestured around the clinic, "was her world. They took Shadow, of course. He never left Jamal's side. Did he mention anything unusual before they left? Any tension? Fears?" "No," Lorraine said after a long pause. "He was happy, relaxed, looking forward to it. And after that? Nothing. No calls, no messages. We reported them missing within 48 hours. They found the truck at a trailhead. No sign of them, no gear, no dog, just gone." Shaw took notes but didn't interrupt. Lorraine glanced at the glass wall, where Shadow still lay. "Until today." "Yes," Shaw said carefully. "And that's why we're treating this as a potential criminal case, not an accident. Not anymore." Lorraine turned sharply. "You mean you weren't before?" Shaw hesitated. "The original case leaned heavily on the theory of an animal attack or a fall, given the terrain. But now, someone helped that dog. Someone may have kept him, or seen what happened." Lorraine's hands clenched. "Then why didn't they come forward?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Shaw replied. "People don't hide unless they're afraid, or involved." There was a knock on the door. Another officer poked his head in. "Detective? We pulled the original ranger records and emergency responder reports, and something else. A visitor log from a fire watch station about 7 miles from the trailhead. One of the logs from 2 months ago mentions a large black dog with a wounded leg, seen near the perimeter." 2 months ago? Lorraine breathed. "And no one followed up?" "We're combing through it now," the officer said. "But here's the thing. The dog was limping, but it was carrying something in its mouth. Looked like cloth. A sleeve, maybe. And it disappeared into the woods before the ranger could get close." Shaw stood. "Get a team up to that location. Grid search. And someone pull all vet records in that area. Leg wound like that, someone might have patched him up off the books." Lorraine felt dizzy. She held the edge of the table to steady herself. Mrs. Carter, Shaw said gently, we'll find out what happened, but you need to know something. Someone wanted Shadow to survive. That bandage, it was rough, but it wasn't malicious. They helped him, maybe even let him go. Or maybe Jamal did, Lorraine said quietly. Maybe he made Shadow leave to find me. Shaw met her eyes. That's also possible. The room felt colder suddenly. The weight of what wasn't being said loomed between them. If Jamal had survived long enough to send Shadow back, what kind of nightmare had he stayed behind in? And if someone else had kept Shadow all this time, patched him up, what had they seen that made them hide? Outside, the wind picked up through the trees. The mountains loomed just beyond the city skyline, ancient, silent witnesses to everything. Lorraine stood slowly and looked back at the glass. Shadow had shifted, eyes half open, staring at her, watching, waiting. Then we follow the trail, she whispered. Whatever he remembers, I will too. And in that moment, Lorraine Carter made a silent vow. Whatever her son had endured, whatever Monica's fate, whatever horror had sent that dog back across the wilderness, she would face it all. Lorraine Carter stood beside Shadow's recovery crate, the soft hiss of the oxygen machine and steady drip of the IV line the only sounds in the room. The clinic had closed to the public for the night, but the lights stayed on for them. Shadow's eyes blinked open slowly, flickering with some tired awareness, and when he saw her, he gave the faintest thump of his tail. It made Lorraine cry for the third time that day. You remember me, don't you, baby? She whispered, crouching beside the crate. You came back. You knew I'd be here. Shadow didn't try to rise, but his gaze remained steady, searching hers as if to say something he couldn't. That's when the front door chimed. Lorraine turned, startled, as the night bell signaled someone entering the clinic. Dr. Celia appeared from the back, wiping her hands on a towel, already moving to intercept whoever it was. It's okay, came a voice, firm, low, familiar. Lorraine's breath caught in her throat. Kyle Rowan, assistant district attorney, assigned to the Carter case for nearly a year after the disappearance. He was the one who told her, back then, that sometimes people go into the woods and simply don't come back. He was polite, methodical, and she remembered how clean his shoes had always been, even when he visited the muddy trailhead. Miss Carter, he greeted, nodding as he stepped into the hallway near the recovery room. I heard Shadow returned. That's something. Lorraine nodded slowly, standing up straighter, her hands curling around the back of a chair to keep from shaking. It's more than something. It's a start. Of course, he said, voice low and respectful. I just wanted to stop by and offer whatever support I can. I still have access to some files that weren't shared with the general search teams back then. Maybe it's time to look again. Celia glanced toward Lorraine as if asking silently whether she was comfortable. Lorraine forced a polite nod. Thank you, Mr. Rowan. That would be appreciated. Call me Kyle, he smiled. No need to stand on formality, especially not now. He took a step forward, and that's when Shadow began to growl. It started low. A ripple, like thunder before a storm. Lorraine turned, alarmed. Shadow hadn't made a sound like that since he had returned, not even when his wounds were being cleaned. Now, suddenly, his body tensed, his lips curled, and a deep guttural rumble rose from his chest. Shadow, Lorraine whispered. It's okay. He's not... But the growl only deepened. Shadow tried to rise. His injured leg buckled beneath him, but he didn't care. He was trying to get between Lorraine and Kyle Rowan. The hair on his back stood up, his teeth bared. Easy, Kyle said, raising his hands. But Lorraine didn't miss the subtle shift in his expression. Surprise, yes, but also something else. Annoyance, discomfort. No, fear. He's just disoriented, Kyle added quickly. My jacket probably still smells like a K9 I rode with this morning. Territorial confusion, that's all. But Shadow wasn't confused. Lorraine saw it in his eyes. He wasn't protecting territory. He was protecting her. You're right, Lorraine said, her voice quieter now, more level. Animals? They remember. Kyle tilted his head. Excuse me? She stepped between him and the crate slowly, her hand brushing the latch behind her. I said they remember. Faces, voices, smells, people who hurt them, or people who were there when something terrible happened. Shadow didn't stop growling. His gaze never left Rowan. It's probably best I go, Kyle said, already backing toward the door. Long day. Let's reconnect when things have settled. I'll be here, Lorraine said. We'll both be here. Once the door closed behind him, the growl from Shadow began to fade, but his eyes remained locked on the empty doorway. Celia exhaled slowly. That wasn't normal. No, Lorraine whispered. It wasn't. They moved Shadow into a quieter room after that, somewhere further from the front entrance. Lorraine didn't sleep. She sat by his crate, replaying everything in her mind, the look in Kyle Rowan's eyes when Shadow reacted, the way he'd tried to explain it away, the way his voice shifted when Shadow wouldn't break eye contact. Lorraine didn't trust that man. She never had. And now she had more than instinct. She had confirmation from something purer than memory, animal truth. The next morning, her younger son Tyrone arrived from Atlanta. He burst into the clinic with a duffel bag over one shoulder, still wearing his firehouse jacket, eyes red from worry. "Mom," he breathed, pulling her into a hug. "You okay?" Lorraine nodded into his chest. "Shadow's here. He's alive." Tyrone looked past her to the crate. "Oh my God," he whispered. "He looks like hell." "He made it back," she said softly. "He came home." Tyrone knelt in front of the crate. Shadow's tail gave a faint wag. Tyrone smiled, blinking hard. That dog always could find his way back. But Lorraine's face was tight, serious. He reacted to someone yesterday. Who? Kyle Rowan. Tyrone's brows furrowed. The ADA? That guy gave me the creeps even before all this. Shadow nearly tore through the bars, she said. Didn't hesitate. That dog doesn't lie, Tyrone said grimly. Not about something like that. Lorraine nodded, reaching for her purse. Then, it's time we stop waiting. For what? For them to find Jamal, she said, her voice steady now. Because if someone bandaged Shadow, someone else is still out there. And I'm not waiting another 2 years for answers. Denina, the trailhead where Jamal and Monica Carter were last seen, was nearly forgotten now. Choked by weeds, the old wooden sign barely legible under moss, and the parking lot cracked with tufts of grass punching through asphalt. Tyrone stood beside his truck, arms crossed over his chest, eyes narrowed as he scanned the dense woods ahead. Behind him, Lorraine leaned on her cane, the mountain air crisp against her face, as she stared at the spot where her son's life had last left a mark on the world. 2 years. 2 years since the search teams combed these hills and declared them gone. 2 years since Kyle Rowan stood here with a clipboard, reciting procedure like a eulogy. Lorraine could still remember how odd it had felt even then. How Kyle's shoes were polished, spotless, while the forest floor was wet with recent rain and churned from searchers' boots. He hadn't even stepped past the gravel. That memory throbbed now like a bruise. Do you really think we'll find anything after all this time? Tyrone asked. Lorraine didn't answer at first. She stepped slowly toward the trailhead, her cane sinking slightly into the softened earth. I think we're not done asking the questions they stopped asking. Tyrone sighed, adjusting the strap of his backpack. Detective Shaw's got a team sweeping a different area near the old fire watch tower. She said that's where Shadow may have been spotted. Then we'll go where no one looked, Lorraine said. Where they never thought to go. Together they stepped into the woods. The air shifted, cooler, heavier. Each footstep crushed dry pine needles and stirred the silence. Lorraine followed slowly behind Tyrone, her eyes sweeping the underbrush. She didn't know exactly what she expected to find. A scrap of fabric? A broken compass? A bloodstain preserved by shade? Or maybe something more abstract. A feeling. A shift in the air that said, someone was taken here. They walked for hours, marking trees with colored tape and using a handheld GPS to track their loop. Shadow's trail, according to the rangers, had zigzagged over dozens of miles, fragmented by time and terrain. But Lorraine trusted something deeper now, mother's instinct, sharpened by silence. You remember that summer when Jamal got lost in the woods behind Pop's cabin? Lorraine asked as they crossed a shallow stream. Tyrone chuckled. We were 12. He was too proud to admit he took the wrong turn. Hid in the trees for hours just to prove a point. And still found his way back, she said. Just like Shadow. Tyrone's smile faded. But he's not the one who came back this time. They pressed on. Near a grove of old cypress trees, Lorraine paused. Something didn't feel right. The air was thicker, quieter, no birdsong, no scurrying squirrels. And then she saw it. A nail, rusted, driven into the bark of a tree. Below it, half buried in leaf litter, a piece of rope, frayed and old, looped into a knot only someone experienced in camping or field restraint would know. Tyrone crouched beside it, brushing away debris. That's military. Jamal used to tie our gear with this exact knot. That's no coincidence. Lorraine's heart hammered. They were here. Tyrone stood, his face hardening. Someone tried to erase it. As if on cue, a twig snapped behind them. Lorraine spun, her breath catching. But it was only a ranger, young, panting, sweat streaking his brow. "Ma'am, sir, we need you back at the station. Detective Shaw's orders." "Why?" Tyrone asked. "Shadow's not okay?" "He's fine," the ranger said, but his eyes were anxious. "It's not the dog, it's the ADA. Rowan, there's been a development." Lorraine didn't ask questions. She turned, already walking back toward the trailhead, her pace urgent despite the pain in her joints. Tyrone helped her over a fallen log. "What kind of development?" "He's missing," the ranger replied. "Vanished from his house. And we just got word he'd booked a private flight to a non-extradition country. Under a false name." Tyrone cursed under his breath. "He ran." Lorraine didn't slow down. "Because he knows the truth is coming. And he knows that dog remembers." They reached the edge of the woods by dusk, the sky bleeding amber behind the mountains. As they neared the truck, a black SUV screeched to a halt nearby. Detective Shaw stepped out, looking pale but determined. "We found something," she said. "A contact of Rowan's, an off-grid cabin registered under an alias, just west of here. Surveillance caught someone dropping off supplies last week. And get this." She paused. "They had a dog crate, with blood on the inside." Lorraine's stomach turned. "Then Shadow wasn't just escaping, he was released. Or Jamal sent him," Tyrone added, jaw clenched, "which means Jamal might still be alive." Shaw nodded. "And if he is, Rowan was keeping him somewhere." Lorraine closed her eyes, her breath trembling. "Then, we're not stopping now." "We're mobilizing tonight," Shaw said. "SWAT is coming in. Quiet, fast, no media. If he's holding someone, you go," Lorraine said. "We'll follow." Shaw looked at her, then nodded once and turned back toward her car. As the engine roared to life, Lorraine whispered, "He never searched the mud." "What?" Tyrone asked. "Rowan," she said, staring down at her shoes, now caked in forest grime. His shoes were always clean, even when he said he'd been at the trail. He was never looking for Jamal. He was keeping him hidden. Tyrone's expression darkened. "And now we're going to find what he tried to bury." As they drove back toward town, the headlights cut through the darkening road. Shadow would be waiting. And in his silence, he still remembered what Rowan never thought he'd have to answer for. Rain started falling just after midnight, thin at first, then steady, drumming softly against the windows of Lorraine Carter's house as thunder rolled over the North Carolina hills. Inside, the living room was dim except for the lamp she left glowing beside Shadow's bed, casting flickers of light across the old wooden floorboards. Lorraine sat in her armchair, her cane resting across her knees, eyes locked on the window, even though there was nothing to see but darkness and her own reflection. She hadn't moved much since returning from the trailhead. Her body was still aching from the hike, but her mind wouldn't rest. Shadow stirred in the corner, lifting his head slowly from the blanket. The sedation had worn off hours ago, and the vet had assured her he was stable but still weak. And yet, in the dim silence of the house, Shadow's body began to shift. First his ears, rising sharply, then his nose, twitching toward the door. Lorraine leaned forward. "What is it, boy?" Shadow's eyes locked on the front window, his body rigid. The soft, barely audible sound of gravel crunching under tires reached Lorraine's ears. Her heart skipped. She stood, slowly, painfully, and reached for her cane. Outside, headlights moved like ghosts behind the trees lining her driveway. 3 taps at the front door, not a knock, taps, rhythmic, deliberate. Lorraine's skin crawled. She moved toward the window and pulled back the curtain just a crack. A dark figure stood beneath her porch light, face shadowed beneath the brim of a rain-soaked hat. Shadow's growl rumbled low in his throat, barely restrained. Lorraine called out through the door. "Who is it?" A familiar voice responded, calm and too smooth. "Miss Carter, it's Kyle Rowan. I think we need to talk." She didn't move. "You're supposed to be missing." "I know how it looks, but I didn't run. I'm trying to protect myself. There are people watching me, dangerous people. I came to warn you." Shadow barked once, sharp and visceral, lunging toward the door. Lorraine's fingers tightened around the cane. She looked toward the dog. Every hair on his back was standing, his teeth bared. "You should go," she said, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. Please just let me explain, Rowan pleaded. It's not what you think. Shadow snarled now, pacing like a wolf behind the door. I'm not opening this door, Lorraine said coldly. You can talk to the police. There was silence, then a shift, a creak on the porch. She saw Rowan's silhouette hesitate, then step back. And then he was gone. Lorraine didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By sunrise, Detective Shaw's call came. He was spotted near your property last night, Shaw said. We're tracking him, but he's dangerous. You need to stay somewhere safe. I'm not going anywhere, Lorraine replied. If he came back, it means he's nervous. It means he's losing control. Later that morning, Tyrone arrived. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse. I couldn't sleep either, he admitted, stepping into the living room where Shadow now sat alert, his body coiled like a spring. Shadow knows, Lorraine whispered. He's remembering more. Every time that man gets close, he reacts faster. Tyrone looked at the dog. He's trying to tell us something. They brought in a canine behaviorist, someone Celia the vet recommended. A quiet woman named Dr. Harper, with calm hands and a voice that made even Lorraine's heart slow down. She watched Shadow, studied his reactions to different scents, sounds, even photos. When she played a short audio recording, Detective Shaw provided Kyle Rowan's voice from a press conference. Shadow went rigid, tail tucked, then snarled. Dr. Harper looked up. That's fear, but also aggression. That's the sound of trauma. He associates that voice with pain, maybe captivity. So he was there, Tyrone said. Wherever Rowan held Jamal, Shadow was with him. There's more, Harper added. I tested his response to different materials, cloth, leather, plastic. When I showed him a swatch of dark canvas, like the kind used for industrial aprons, he barked, circled, then scratched at the floor. He knows it. Maybe someone wore it near him. Lorraine's voice was quiet. Then, Jamal might still be in a place like that. Tyrone turned to her. Mom, what if he sent Shadow back on purpose? She nodded. That's what I've been thinking. He sent him home to find us. At that moment, the landline rang. An ancient cordless phone Lorraine kept more out of habit than necessity. She picked it up, expecting Shaw. But the voice on the other end was not hers. It was male, thin, tired. And it said only 3 words. Lorraine, help me! Her heart stopped. Jamal, she whispered. But the line went dead. She stared at the receiver, her hand trembling. Tyrone rushed to her side. Who was it? She turned, eyes wide with tears, and something else. Fire. It was him. Behind her, Shadow stood now, not just alert, ready. Tail stiff, eyes focused, head turned toward the door again, like he knew the next step had arrived. The night had brought the first call. The voice had confirmed what the dog already knew. And Lorraine Carter, after 2 years of waiting, was done sitting in the dark. The sun hadn't yet climbed past the tree line when Lorraine Carter, Tyrone, and Detective Shaw's tactical team arrived at the edge of an abandoned industrial road in rural Buncombe County. The forest here was different. Too quiet, too still, like it had learned to hold its breath. Cracked pavement gave way to tire ruts and loose gravel, and through the break in the trees, the silhouette of a rusted warehouse loomed like a scar pressed into the hillside. Shaw stood in front of the black SUV, binoculars in hand. We ran the coordinates from the call. This is the only structure within 2 miles. It's listed as a former lumber sorting facility, shut down 20 years ago. Well, who owns it now? Tyrone asked, his eyes never leaving the warehouse. A shell company tied to a real estate holding firm in Tampa. And guess whose name shows up on their legal team? Lorraine's voice was flat. Kyle Rowan? Shaw nodded grimly. We've got unmarked units watching the perimeter. No power to the main grid, but someone's using a generator. No movement inside, yet. Lorraine's hand clutched the old photograph she carried in her coat pocket. Jamal, Monica, and Shadow on the back porch one summer morning, coffee mugs in hand and laughter frozen in time. She traced the image of her son's smile with her thumb and then tucked it away. I'm going in, Tyrone said. Shaw turned. Absolutely not. We don't know what's in there. Booby traps, guards. My brother might be in there, he said. 2 years. He could be 10 feet away and we wouldn't know. Shaw sighed, but there was a flash of understanding in her eyes. You stay behind me. You move when I move. And if I say fall back, you do it. Lorraine looked toward the warehouse, then down at the van parked nearby, where Shadow waited with Dr. Harper. The dog was pacing again. Slow, tight circles in the crate. He knew. Wait, Lorraine said suddenly. Let him lead. What? Shaw blinked. A shadow, Lorraine said firmly. Open the crate. Let him out. Let's see where he goes. Dr. Harper hesitated only a moment, then unlatched the door. Shadow stepped out slowly, his movements stiff but purposeful. He sniffed the air, the ground, then raised his head and trotted, without pause, straight toward the warehouse. They followed. The path led behind the main structure, where a second, smaller building stood, nearly swallowed by ivy and pine. Shadow stopped at the rusted side door, tail still, gaze fixed. Shaw motioned her team forward. They surrounded the entry, guns raised, silent hand signals passing between them. Shaw tested the knob. Locked. She nodded once, and a breaching officer stepped up. Boom. The door splintered inward. The air inside was heavy with oil and mildew. The first thing they saw was a row of empty dog crates, rusted and stained. The second thing was a bloodied mattress tucked into the corner behind stacked pallets. And the third, a human figure, chained to a support beam. Emaciated, motionless, but alive. Shadow lunged forward with a cry that was half bark, half sob, and the man stirred. A voice, hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Shadow? Tyrone pushed past the officers before they could stop him. Jamal! His brother blinked through a haze of pain and recognition. Ty? Lorraine collapsed to her knees, tears burning her face. Oh my God. Baby, oh God. Jamal Carter, after 743 days in hell, looked up at his family, still tethered to rusted chains but alive. His first instinct not to speak, not to cry, but to reach for the dog that had found a way home. Shadow nuzzled against his side, whimpering, licking his master's face, as if trying to stitch together 2 years of pain with touch alone. Medics rushed forward. One started working on the chains, while another knelt beside Jamal to assess his vitals. Shaw stepped back, her voice low into the radio. Victim located, male, 40s, severe malnutrition, dehydration, conscious, responding, request immediate medevac. Tyrone held his brother's hand the entire time they freed him. Jamal winced with each movement, but he didn't let go. Lorraine stayed just behind them, whispering prayers through cracked lips. He's alive, she kept saying. He's alive! He's alive! As they lifted Jamal onto the stretcher, one of the officers pulled a battered duffel bag from beneath the mattress. Inside were spiral notebooks. Dozens of them, water-damaged and scorched. Some pages were covered in scrawl, others were neat, meticulous. Names, locations, dates. Shaw flipped through the pages, her face paling. Jesus, she murmured. This is a record. He was documenting everything. Jamal turned his head weakly toward them. They thought I'd forget, thought I'd break. He coughed, then whispered, I remembered everything. Shadow followed beside the stretcher, his steps slow but determined, never letting Jamal out of his sight. As they exited the building, the rising sun cast pale orange across the ridge. The woods exhaled. The birds returned. And for the first time in 2 years, so did Jamal Carter. The hospital room was quiet, except for the beeping of monitors and the occasional low hum of the oxygen machine. Early morning light slipped through the blinds in soft golden lines, tracing the outline of Jamal Carter's frail body beneath crisp white sheets. His once powerful frame had withered into something barely recognizable, skin stretched tight over bone, muscles atrophied, ribs visible even through the gown, but his eyes, though sunken, were sharp, focused, alive. Lorraine sat beside the bed in a padded recliner, her hand resting lightly over his. Shadow lay curled on the floor nearby, tail thumping gently each time Jamal stirred. Tyrone stood at the window, arms crossed, jaw tense, staring into the parking lot without seeing anything at all. I thought you were dead, Lorraine whispered, not for the first time. Jamal's voice was a cracked whisper. So did they. A knock at the door interrupted the silence. Detective Shaw entered, notepad in hand, her face drawn but composed. With her was Agent Cruz from the FBI. Broad-shouldered, quiet, his presence both respectful and urgent. Shaw spoke first. Jamal, we don't want to overwhelm you, but if you're ready, we need to begin the debriefing. Anything you can tell us could bring this entire operation down. What you remember could save lives. Jamal nodded slowly. I've been waiting 2 years to talk. Lorraine squeezed his hand gently before letting go. I'll be right outside. He shook his head. No, stay. Tyrone moved to his other side. Me too. Jamal's gaze locked with Shaw's. Then let's begin. He closed his eyes for a moment, collecting his thoughts. And then, in a voice low but steady, he began. It started with Monica. Lorraine's breath caught, but she said nothing. They found us on the second night, Jamal said. We were camping near the ridge. I saw flashlights in the trees. I thought maybe it was park rangers. It wasn't. 4 men, all armed, said they were part of a private security firm. At first I thought it was some kind of mistaken identity, but then they said my name. They knew who I was. And they knew I used to work in cyber intel for the Army. Someone had been tracking me for months. Agent Cruz leaned forward. Do you remember any names? Jamal nodded. Not at first, but later, yes. They weren't just mercenaries. They were part of a network. Black market operatives, laundering money through land developments, tied into real estate firms and supply chains. Rowan wasn't just legal cover. He was coordinating asset cleanups. They needed someone who could decode military backdoor systems and knew how to identify blind spots in federal surveillance routes. That was me. Why didn't they kill you outright? Tyrone asked, voice taut. Because they had Monica, Jamal said. His face twisted and his voice faltered. They took her first. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd start sending her back in pieces. So I stalled, I gave them outdated info, delayed, bought time. But after 6 months, they figured it out. He paused, swallowing hard. They brought her into my cell. She was bruised but not broken. She looked at me and said, "Don't give them what they want." And when she tried to escape, they shot her. Made me watch. Said it was my fault. Lorraine gasped softly. Shadow whined at her feet. I wanted to die after that, Jamal whispered. But then I remembered Shadow. He was in another cage, barely fed, covered in cuts. And that gave me something to live for. They thought he was just a dog, but I taught him things. Hand signals, object association. So I started hiding clues. Scraps of maps, coordinates, numbers scratched into plastic cups. Eventually, I convinced them to let me say goodbye to him. Told them I was dying and ready to give up secrets. But really, I used that moment to slip him the last piece. I attached a cloth with Rowan's name and a drop site. I knew Shadow would find a way back. Shaw's voice was hushed. You risked everything. Jamal looked at her. So did Monica. I wasn't going to let her die for nothing. Agent Cruz nodded solemnly. We've already made 8 arrests based on the intel you left in that duffel. Your notes, your memory, they're solid. We're tracking every shell company tied to the operation. And Rowan, he's running scared. Not scared enough, Tyrone muttered. Shaw exchanged a glance with Cruz. There's one more thing. We found evidence that Rowan visited the warehouse just hours before we got there. There was a secondary exit tunnel beneath the building. He slipped out before the raid. Jamal's eyes narrowed. Then you'd better find him before he disappears for good. We're working every angle, Cruz assured. And we'll need your testimony when you're stronger. Jamal nodded once, his energy fading. You'll get it. The agent stepped back to let the family settle again. Lorraine brushed Jamal's hair back from his forehead, her hands trembling. You didn't break, she whispered. You held on. He looked at her, the ghost of a smile flickering. Because I knew you'd still be waiting. In the corner, Shadow lifted his head, gaze locked on Jamal like he was still guarding him from shadows unseen. The man had survived torture, loss, silence. But not even years in darkness had made him forget who he was, or the people who loved him. He hadn't broken. But the cost was written in every scar dot. Rain fell like nails on the windshield as the unmarked SUV tore down the Blue Ridge Parkway, tires slicing through puddles while red and blue strobes lit the fog-drenched pines. Inside, Detective Shaw sat beside Agent Cruz, a tablet open on her lap, showing satellite images and heat signatures near the Virginia border. He's heading north, she said grimly, pointing to a flicker on the screen. That's Rowan's SUV. State troopers picked up his plates outside Roanoke 4 hours ago. Then he vanished off-grid again. But here's what's interesting. He didn't take the interstate. He went back into the mountains. Why? Cruz muttered. He knows we're after him. He should be flying out by now. Shaw zoomed in on the satellite overlay. Because Rowan's not just running, he's retrieving something. Or someone, Cruz added darkly. They both knew what that meant. Loose ends, evidence, witnesses. Back in Asheville, Lorraine paced the length of the hospital hallway, hands clenched behind her back. She had barely slept. Jamal was stable, but drifting in and out, exhausted by the trauma and the sudden demands of federal attention. He hadn't spoken again since the debrief, but every time his eyes opened, they flickered toward the door, like he was waiting for someone to come finish what they started. Shadow sat outside the ICU room like a sentinel, unmoving, his fur still patchy where the wounds had begun to scar, but his ears twitched constantly, responding to every footstep, every voice. Tyrone stepped out of the room with 2 coffees, offering one to Lorraine. Doctor says he'll be strong enough for transfer in a week. Rehab after that. Lorraine accepted the cup with a nod, but her eyes never left the window. He's not safe here. They've got 2 armed marshals posted on the floor, Tyrone said. SWAT's on call. Cruz said every exit's covered. Lorraine's voice was low, bitter. Kyle Rowan doesn't use the front door. Before Tyrone could reply, Shadow stood. A sound, inaudible to them, had caught him. His body stiffened. Then he growled. Lorraine's eyes widened. He smells something. Tyrone rushed to the nurse's desk. Lock this floor down now. But before the lockdown could trigger, an orderly pushed a cart around the far corner of the hallway. Shadow's growl deepened, now a low snarl, as the cart rolled closer. Lorraine saw the man's gait. Wrong, too slow, too cautious. The orderly glanced up. Wrong face, wrong eyes. Shadow lunged. The hallway erupted in chaos. The fake orderly dropped the cart and pulled a concealed weapon from beneath a blanket just as Shadow launched at him. The shot went off, shattering a light fixture, but Shadow's weight slammed the man backward, teeth sinking deep into his arm. Lorraine screamed. Tyrone tackled the attacker from behind. Hospital security poured in, weapons drawn. It took 4 officers to restrain Shadow, but he refused to release the man's arm until 2 marshals secured the weapon and slammed cuffs onto the attacker's wrists. Blood pooled on the floor. The man groaned, face twisted in rage. "Where's Rowan?" Shaw demanded, arriving seconds later, badge out, gun raised. The man spit blood. "He's not done." Meanwhile, 60 miles north, Cruz's SUV pulled up to a remote cabin nestled against a rock face in Giles County in Virginia. There were no lights on, no smoke from the chimney, but Cruz saw the fresh tire tracks in the mud. Shaw nodded toward the back. 2 exits, I'll take the side. Cruz moved toward the front, his radio crackled. Units in position. They breached together. The cabin was cold, empty at first glance. Then Cruz spotted it. A trapdoor behind the stove, slightly ajar. They lifted it slowly, revealing stairs descending into a narrow basement. They found rows of filing boxes, electronics, flash drives taped to walls, surveillance logs, names, audio tapes. And in the corner, a suitcase, passport, burner phone, airline ticket, flight to Belize, scheduled for that night. Shaw spoke into her radio. We've got enough to bury him, but no sign of Rowan. Cruz frowned. He's not going to Belize. Back at the hospital, Lorraine sat beside Jamal, clutching his hand as he blinked awake. I saw him, she whispered. One of Rowan's men. He was here. Jamal's voice was barely audible. He won't stop. You don't have to, she said softly. We'll stop him for you. That night, Cruz returned with a flash drive from the cabin. He handed it to Shaw. Encrypted, but the name of the folder? She raised an eyebrow. Monica? Shaw's jaw clenched. Then this was personal. Cruz nodded. Rowan didn't just use Jamal, he targeted him. And that meant Rowan wouldn't run until he'd finished what he started. But they weren't running anymore either. Now, they were hunting back. Dot. The hospital lights flickered faintly, as if even the building could feel the weight of what was coming. And in room 417, Jamal Carter lay still beneath crisp white sheets. His breathing shallow, Shadow curled at his bedside, one paw draped protectively across his foot, like a silent oath, sworn in the language of loyalty and pain. Lorraine sat beside him, her fingers tracing faint circles across the back of his hand, her gaze locked not on the monitors or the IV lines, but on the old scar along his temple, the one he got when he was 8 and fell off the porch chasing a basketball. A tiny reminder that even before the darkness, he was always a boy who ran too far, believed too much, and never learned to quit. Tyrone stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, listening to Agent Cruz's voice crackle through the line. We decrypted the folder, Cruz said. It wasn't just files, it was a failsafe. Monica's failsafe. Tyrone's knuckles whitened around the phone. Monica? What do you mean? Cruz's voice dropped, serious, reverent. She left a trail. Before they were taken, she suspected someone inside Jamal's old security clearance circle was leaking information. She didn't trust anyone, not even his own superiors. She kept everything off-grid, Passwords, codes, audio memos. We found one, time-stamped 4 days before the abduction. Tyrone glanced at his brother, then stepped into the hallway. What did it say? On the other end, Cruz was quiet for a beat before playing the recording. Monica's voice filled the receiver, shaky but fierce. If you're hearing this, it means Jamal and I didn't make it home. It means the system failed, and Kyle Rowan did what I always feared he would. He's not just part of it, he's orchestrating it. He's laundering identities, not just money. He's building something bigger, something global, and he's using Jamal to do it. But he underestimated me. I left breadcrumbs, the names, the faces, and one place he doesn't know about, Ashcroft Hollow. Tell Lorraine, tell Tyrone, finish what I started. Tyrone's mouth went dry. She knew. She tried to stop him, Cruz said. And now it's our turn. Back inside, Lorraine met her son's eyes as he stirred. I heard her, Jamal rasped, before they shot her. She told me to keep fighting, said Shadow would remember the way. Tears spilled down Lorraine's cheeks, and she bent forward, pressing her forehead to his. Then we follow him, she whispered, all the way to Ashcroft Hollow. That name hadn't been spoken in years, not since Jamal was stationed in the reserves nearby. It was a ghost town, swallowed by forest and forgotten by maps. And now, it might hold the final key to everything. Within the hour, Shaw, Cruz, and a small federal task force were mobilizing. Shadow was loaded gently into the back of a black SUV, his eyes alert now, not as a patient, but as a tracker. Lorraine rode in the back seat, clutching Monica's old necklace, retrieved from one of the storage boxes at the warehouse. She hadn't worn it in years, but now it burned warm against her palm, like memory turned to fire. As the convoy neared the hollow, the road narrowed, trees pressed close, and fog crept low across the asphalt like breath held too long. Shadow began to whine softly, nose pressed to the glass. He remembers, Shaw said. We're close. The convoy stopped at the base of an overgrown trailhead. Old signage barely clung to its posts. Ashcroft Logging Operations, closed since 1982. Beyond it, thick forest swallowed all sound. Shadow leapt out of the car before they could open the door fully, his paws finding purpose, his tail high, body tense. Let him lead, Lorraine said again, and no one argued. Deeper into the hollow they followed, past collapsed buildings, shattered crates, and rusting machinery half-eaten by vines. Then, without warning, Shadow stopped. He growled. And from the trees behind them, a shot rang out. Everyone dove. Cruz screamed for cover. Shaw rolled toward a fallen beam, drawing her weapon. Shadow barked, darting behind Lorraine. Tyrone shielded her as another shot cracked through the silence. Sniper! Someone shouted. He's here! Eyes in the tree line! Cruz roared. Lorraine's heart pounded as dust filled the air, the woods erupting into chaos. But through it all, she saw him. Just for a second. A shadow slipping through the trees, blonde hair soaked in sweat, rifle slung across his chest. Kyle Rowan. He wasn't running anymore. He was hunting. He's trying to erase it, Shaw shouted. Ashcroft is his burn site. He's here to destroy the last pieces. Lorraine's voice cut through the noise. Then we don't let him. She turned to Shadow, pointed toward the cabin he had stopped in front of. Go, boy. Show us what's left. The dog bolted forward, barking like he never had since he came home. Inside the cabin, beneath the rotted floorboards, the team found a trap door, locked, but not secure enough. Within it, drives, documents, printed passports, blueprints, names etched into ledgers Monica had marked. It was all here, everything. Kyle had come to erase it, but they had arrived too soon, or maybe just in time. Outside, agents secured the perimeter, and far above them, Rowan fled through the trees, blood already leaking from his side, where Tyrone's return fire had grazed him. He was injured, cornered, and this time, there was no more hiding. Back in the clearing, Shadow stood at the edge of the trail, tail straight, eyes locked on the horizon. He wasn't barking anymore, just waiting, like he knew the hunt had only just begun, and he wouldn't stop. Not until justice was more than a word, not until the last name in Monica's file was crossed out, not until the man who thought he'd erased them was finally seen. The woods had gone still again, the kind of stillness that hums inside your bones and makes even the birds quiet. Fog crept low across the mossy floor of Ashcroft Hollow as agents fanned out in silence, weapons raised, ears tuned to the rhythm of the trees. Somewhere out there, Kyle Rowan was bleeding, hunted, and for the first time, afraid. Lorraine stood at the center of the clearing, staring at the old logging cabin where Monica's final evidence had been recovered. A battered folder lay open on a makeshift table under floodlights, names scribbled in her handwriting, some underlined, some crossed out, and one still circled in red: Rowan. Her stomach clenched. That circle wasn't just a target. It was a warning. Monica had known all along who the real threat was. Behind her, Tyrone adjusted his bulletproof vest and scanned the ridge with a scope. "He's up there," he muttered. "That ridge line overlooks both trails. It's where I'd go to pick people off one by one." Detective Shaw nodded beside him. "He's a prosecutor. He knows how to control a courtroom. But out here, the trees don't follow rules. They echo what they're given." Cruz's voice crackled through the comms. "Perimeter tight. Drones sweeping. Blood trail confirms he's injured. We've got his prints on the files recovered. He's finished." But Lorraine shook her head. "Not yet. He didn't come here to escape. He came here to end it. He'd rather die in these woods than testify from a prison cell." Shadow stood beside her, ears pricked, nose twitching at the damp air. Then, suddenly, he growled. Not toward the trail, toward the trees, behind them. Tyrone whipped around. "Movement, 6 o'clock!" A flash of motion, a glint of steel. Then Rowan appeared through the pines, clothes torn, left arm wrapped in a blood-soaked rag. He held a pistol loosely in his right hand, wobbling slightly as he stepped forward, but his eyes burned bright with something unhinged. "I should have killed him when I had the chance," he spat. But Monica got in the way. She always got in the way. Lorraine took a step forward. "She believed in something bigger than you. That's why she died standing." Rowan's voice cracked like dry wood. "You think any of this changes anything? There's more like me, ones you'll never see coming. You think you've won because you found a file in a floorboard?" Shaw raised her weapon. "Put the gun down, Kyle. You're done." But Rowan smiled. "I'm not afraid of prison." He looked at Lorraine. "I'm just afraid of what happens if he talks." Then he lifted the pistol toward her. Shadow moved first. With a snarl that seemed to come from some ancient place in his chest, the black Labrador launched forward. The shot fired, but missed. Shadow slammed into Rowan's side, tearing into his shoulder with teeth meant for protection, not revenge. The gun clattered into the leaves. Rowan screamed. Tyrone and Shaw moved in fast, pinning him, forcing him face down into the mud, Miranda rights echoing through the trees like final judgment. Lorraine dropped to her knees beside Shadow, who panted heavily but hadn't let go until Rowan had been fully disarmed. She wrapped her arms around him, her tears warm against his fur. "You did it, boy," she whispered. "You brought us here." Rowan was dragged to his feet, bloodied, shaking, no longer smug, just small. Cruz appeared with cuffs in hand. "Kyle Rowan, you're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and murder. You'll never see sunlight without bars again." Rowan looked past them all, toward Lorraine. "He'll talk, but it won't save you." But Lorraine only smiled, tired, weathered, but full of something he would never understand. "He already did. That's why we're here." They airlifted Jamal to a secure rehabilitation center 2 days later, away from the public eye. By then, the files from Ashcroft Hollow had made their way to federal prosecutors, whistleblower protections had been issued, and Monica's voice, her warnings, were already shaping national headlines. Monica Carter wasn't just a vet. She was a visionary, a protector. And in her final act, she left behind not just clues, but a roadmap to justice. Lorraine visited Jamal every morning. He was stronger now, sitting up on his own, voice still quiet but steady. Shadow never left his side, a black-furred reminder of what survived when everything else broke. And one morning, as Lorraine poured coffee from the thermos she brought from home, Jamal looked at her and said softly, "She knew I couldn't carry it alone." Lorraine paused, then sat beside him. So she gave some of it to a dog who'd never give up. They looked at Shadow, who blinked sleepily from the rug. "I used to think the woods swallowed us," Jamal murmured. "But I was wrong. The woods echoed us back." Lorraine reached for his hand, and now the world is listening. 3 months later, the federal courthouse in Charlotte was packed beyond capacity. Rows of journalists, families of other missing persons, former military whistleblowers, and Department of Justice officials lined every bench. And at the center of it all, beneath the heavy arc of a walnut gavel and the motto, "Equal Justice Under Law," sat Jamal Carter, flanked by his attorney, the FBI's chief investigator, and a quiet black Labrador with a red bandana tied proudly around his neck. Shadow. The courtroom had never seen anything like this. From the moment Judge Linda Everett called the case, there was electricity in the air, a national security leak, a buried cover-up, a man presumed dead reappearing with not only wounds, but records that cracked open a silent rot at the base of the system. And the one witness who had stayed alive long enough to bring those documents back had 4 legs and a scar behind his left ear. As Lorraine Carter sat in the front row, her hands clutched a small worn photograph of Monica. In it, her daughter-in-law was smiling, wind whipping through her curls, cradling Shadow as a pup. Lorraine's chest ached, but not with grief this time, with resolve. The prosecutor, Marla Dean, stood confidently. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you are about to hear is not simply a case about corruption. It is a case about how silence was engineered, and how loyalty, both human and otherwise, dismantled it. She nodded to Jamal. We will present testimony from Mr. Carter, from forensics, from federal data experts, and from Monica Carter's recovered logs. What we cannot present, what we have lost forever, is the woman who sacrificed everything to make sure this day arrived. She turned briefly to the defense. Kyle Rowan sat stiffly, now pale and gaunt in an ill-fitting suit. His lawyers looked hollowed, weary of the files they couldn't deny. Then she looked down to Shadow, resting calmly at Jamal's feet. And we will tell you how, even after losing his humans, this dog refused to stop. He walked through fire, through forest, and into the arms of justice. Jamal rose slowly to the stand. Though still recovering from months of malnutrition, the fire in his voice had returned. Monica knew we were onto something. She had pulled names from an Air Force subcontract audit, the dates, the dead ends, the fake personnel records. She'd found patterns. The problem was, they were patterns inside protected systems. The court leaned in. We weren't supposed to live after we uncovered that, but she planned ahead. We buried the files in a false wall inside a cabin deep in Ashcroft Hollow. She told me, if we don't make it, Shadow will. He paused, looking down. Shadow's ears twitched. They came for us just after sunset. We were setting up camp for the night when I saw the first rifle glint. Monica shoved me down the slope. She shouted something I'll never forget. Don't stop running. He'll follow. Then she went back and I heard the shots. The courtroom was breathless. I made it through the valley with Shadow, but I had a head wound. I lost time, days, maybe weeks. I only remember water, mud, and his fur. I passed out. And when I woke up, he was gone. I thought they'd taken him too, but Shadow, he'd gone back. He found her body. He stayed with her. Then somehow, he came back for me. Gasps moved through the room. The bandage you found on his leg? Monica's scarf. I tied it before I passed out. That's how he kept going. She saved both of us. Tears streamed silently down Lorraine's cheek. On cross-examination, the defense tried to discredit him. Mr. Carter, you were malnourished, delusional, injured. Isn't it possible your memory is unreliable? Jamal didn't flinch. I wish it were, but every name Monica circled is now confirmed to be part of a fraud scheme. Every coordinate in her GPS log led the FBI to physical evidence. She died for this. She didn't make mistakes. Then he leaned forward, voice firm. And when the man who helped cover it up testifies next, I want the court to remember. It took a dog to bring us back to this room, not your client. All eyes turned to Kyle Rowan. He shrank into his chair. Outside the courthouse, national news tickers rolled breaking headlines. Whistleblower trial breaks open military fraud scheme. Dog who saved missing man sparks reform hearings. And yet for Lorraine, none of it mattered more than this. After the recess, when the judge returned and glanced toward Shadow and said quietly, "Permission granted for the support dog to remain at the stand," the courtroom stood in quiet agreement. Because Shadow wasn't just a dog anymore. He was evidence. He was witness. He was survivor. He was the last part of Monica's voice still echoing in the room. And he had finally brought her truth home. The day after Kyle Rowan was taken into federal custody, Lorraine sat on the front porch of her Asheville home, the same spot where Shadow had collapsed 8 months ago. The air was heavy with quiet now. Not fear, not uncertainty, but the stillness that follows a storm that has torn everything apart and left only what matters. Shadow lay beside her feet, eyes half closed, basking in the late spring sun. But something about him felt unsettled. Not anxious, just unfinished. Jamal stepped out of the screen door, still on crutches, still a little thinner than she remembered him from the family photos on the wall, but undeniably alive and carrying something. "Mom," he said softly, I think we missed something." She turned slowly. In his hand was the red bandana that had been tied around Shadow's neck. They'd removed it only briefly to give the dog a proper bath at the clinic, but no one had truly examined it. Jamal held it up. "There's stitching here, double lining. Look." He peeled back a small seam and something tiny, metallic, and square slipped into his hand. A micro SD card. Lorraine's hand covered her mouth. They rushed it to the FBI field office in Charlotte. Within hours, technicians decrypted its contents. It was a voice file, a single 2-minute audio message, recorded by Monica, time-stamped 3 days before the attack. The FBI director granted the family permission to hear it first. In a quiet conference room with the blinds drawn and a single speaker on the table, Lorraine pressed play. "Jamal, if you're hearing this, then Shadow made it. That means you might have made it too." Monica's voice cracked through static, clear, calm, unwavering. "I know what we're risking. I also know what we're fighting for. This goes higher than we thought. If I don't make it, promise me you'll live long enough to tell the truth. I don't care if the world forgets my name. Just don't let them bury this. And Shadow, he knows where to go. I trust him more than anything. Take care of him. Take care of your mother. I love you." Silence. Lorraine wept openly. Jamal sat frozen, hands pressed to his face, shoulders heaving with grief and gratitude. Shadow, sensing something sacred, raised his head and whined gently, as if hearing Monica's voice woke something inside him. Later that day, the FBI director issued a rare personal commendation for both Jamal and Shadow. A posthumous medal was awarded to Monica for her civilian contribution to national security. Her name would not be forgotten, not by the agencies, nor by the millions who had followed the trial. A month later, on what would have been Monica's 33rd birthday, a small ceremony was held in Ashcroft Hollow. Jamal placed a handmade wooden marker near the tree where he had last seen her. Lorraine, hands shaking, placed wildflowers there. Shadow sat between them, tail wagging softly, a new collar around his neck, one that read, "She led the way." For Lorraine, closure didn't mean forgetting. It meant that truth had a voice, even when buried, and sometimes the smallest heart, one with fur and 4 legs, could carry that voice across miles of silence. She was never found alive, but her voice, buried in a dog's collar, encrypted in a digital whisper, and echoed in every truth revealed, changed everything. Monica Carter didn't just expose corruption. She gave her life to protect what mattered. Jamal survived, not because of luck, but because of love. Shadow didn't just lead him home, he led justice into the light. And now, her story lives on. Thank you for walking this 12-part journey with Nestsoul. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because somewhere out there, another truth is waiting, and someone or something may already be on its way to reveal it. Because no one disappears without a trace, not really.